Welcome to the woods. It's been a while. It's nice to be back having a chat. And I want to talk about quite a bit. Some good news, some not so good news. Most of you will understand how I live. But for those of you who don't, a quick recap. I bought 2 acres of woodland. I built a cabin for me and my family. I've got about 120 chickens running around, some turkeys, some ducks, some quail, a couple of polytunnels on the go. And I live a nice life. I sat down and worked out the other day what the running costs are for my place, and it's quite a big place. It's 2,000 square foot, 4 bedrooms, a 25-foot lounge, nice big deck out the back. And my running costs are between 20 and 25 quid a week. That's it. There's no rent, there's no mortgage. My electricity is solar powered. I've got a backup generator which I have to use in the winter. So some of that cost is diesel for the Jenny. I've got a big log burner and no shortage of firewood. I've also got a full central heating system which is run by a combi boiler, much the same as you'll have in your house, and that powers the radiators, and that's run on LPG. So that's my other outgoing. And through the year it costs me between 80 and £100 a month. And because of that, it's given me a lot more options on what I can do. I can work less because I don't need the money, or I can carry on working the same. I could have carried on working the same and had more disposable income, or pick a middle path. But it's nice to have those choices. And I think that's what we all want. I hear quite often people say, well, what is it you want? I wanted to live in a country where the government actually put us first, actually had our interests at heart. A country where the government ensured that a man can get a job, and that with that job he can support a wife and a family and afford a home. One of the cats just come to say hello. And we don't have that. And we haven't had that for a long time. And surely that should be the aim of any government. Instead, we find ourselves in a system that pretends to be a democracy. But in reality, we know it isn't. It's all just smoke and mirrors. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter if it's the blue party, the red party, the green, the yellow, or the sky blue pink. The direction they take is always the same. Less for you. You've got to work longer. You've got to work harder. You can't save. Your kids have to pay thousands and thousands for an education that actually isn't going to advantage them at all. Imagine leaving college or university at a young age with £40,000 to £50,000 worth of debt before you've ever done a day's work. We've certainly gone wrong. Oh, we haven't. We still want the same things. We don't want a multicultural society. Every time the people have been asked, it's been a resounding no. And that's not people being racist or bigoted. That's just a preference. We can see with our own eyes what happens. We look further afield to countries like Sweden, that used to have the lowest crime rate in the whole of Europe, a beautiful country, fantastic people. And through the liberal ideal of allowing as many people into the country, whoever wanted to come in, they now find themselves at siege by the immigrants and families of those immigrants. No-go areas, rape, murder, bombings, stabbings. Not just part and parcel of living in a big city, but part and parcel of living in that country. Our own capital over here, London, is the highest knife crime in the whole of Europe. We all know why. We all know who's committing these crimes. Slowly but surely our ability to even talk about these things is being eroded, taken away. Our ability to even protest is being criminalised. Our ability to speak freely in real life and online is being curtailed, so that there can be no dissent, so that no other ideas apart from those that are handed down from on high are even heard. I'm living in a country which is unhappier now than it has ever been, where young men can't even approach women, when young women are confused about their position in life, where the birth rate has dropped to below replacement level and has been for decades, where young people can't afford to buy a house, where rents are so expensive that it takes 90% of their income, where wages are suppressed through the importation of cheap labour, where people in a street no longer know each other, and more to the point, nor do they want to. It's a disjointed, disgruntled, angry country, and it shouldn't be like that. All we wanted was a fair crack of the whip. Give us a country where a man can earn enough money to support his family and buy a house, and he'll work gladly. Give him the opportunity to spend his free time with people like himself, and you will have a happy, productive nation. And happy is the word you should concentrate on there, because people aren't happy. And I've spoken many times about how it's difficult for me sometimes to see people just going about their daily lives in ignorant bliss, a phrase I couldn't think of the last time. Because when you become aware of some of the things that are happening, some of the things that are going to happen, it's incredibly frustrating to see people not understanding, not getting the bigger picture. And it's important we continue to try and wake those people up. But I've been saying this on here for 3-4 years, and for 20 years before that. All we want is a fair crack at the whip. A country run by people that have our interests at heart. And we don't get that. Sadly, the opportunity for us to form new political parties and gain power is shut off. I've seen that from the inside. I've seen how that system works. I've seen both Labour and Conservative members of Parliament with their snouts in that trough. I've seen people appointed to the board of directors of companies. The system will protect itself from anything that will try and change it. But there are things we can do. It will get harder. I take my hat off to the village in Wales, Llanelli, who have just won their fight. The Home Office has withdrawn proposals to house 250 migrant males in the middle of that village. And they've withdrawn it because the whole village stood against that. They didn't want that. They said no. And they continued to say no. And they took to the streets. And in the streets they stayed for 100 days. And they won. And it isn't often we get good news. But that is good news. It's fantastic news for them. And it's good news for us. Because you should be able to see from that what can happen when people come together. There's very little we can do on our own. But when you come together, things can happen. You can win. Now, a lot of you will know that about 5-6 months ago I started an initiative to buy land throughout the UK. And it started with a great success, and we've had a great success. There have been bumps along the way, but we've raised over £90,000, and we've got hundreds of members that will continue to grow. We'll look at buying our first plot of land, and then we will look at how we can use that land. Land that cannot be owned or taken by anybody else, which is what is happening time and time and time again. They're shutting you down into those 20-minute areas by every means they can. They'll charge you more and more to use your car until in the end you stop using it. They'll make it so difficult. They'll make it 20 miles an hour to drive anywhere. And we can see these little things, these little increments, and you can see the lies they use to promote them. They've told us what they want to do. But when you stand together, you can win. It's difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people to understand that things are going to get worse. In a relatively short period of time, our government will change. And as bad as things are now, the next rabble are likely to be even worse. Labour have already put forward proposals for compulsory purchase of land. They're going to build over all of our green spaces. And those houses aren't for you or your children or your grandchildren. Those houses are for millions of people they plan on bringing into this country. And you might ask yourself, why are all these people needed? And the truth of the matter is, they aren't needed. We don't need them. But it will completely change this country. It will make it much easier for those in power to control a disjointed, ununified population. Especially if it's a group of people who have never known the freedoms and the luxuries that we've been lucky to have had handed down to us. So if you're going to take something from this video, understand that I'm not trying to be negative. I'm warning you that things are still continuing, that things are going to get worse, but that if we stand together, and more importantly, if you actually do something, we can win. It is possible to make changes. It is possible to do things for ourselves. And I've said this before, as things get worse, more and more people will look for an alternative. That divide in our population is going to take place. And we need to start building that alternative now. If you don't want to stand on the streets and protest, if you haven't got it in your heart to be an activist, join the Woodlander Initiative and do something. Help us. Help us buy our own land back. We can win, you lot. I'll speak to you soon.